Good evening and welcome. Tonight we'll be going over the history and geography of Uganda. Uganda, as you can see, is a landlocked country in Central Africa. It's bordered to the north here by South Sudan. It has a border here with Kenya. We'll talk about the lake in a moment. It has this border with Tanzania. This border with Rwanda. It's a small country, so small border. And then this whole side is dominated by the border with the Democratic Republic of the Congo, or the DRC. So let's talk about this lake, because that's obviously the biggest geographic feature of Uganda, among other things. But Lake Victoria. Lake Victoria is the second largest freshwater lake in the world after Lake Superior in the United States and Canada. And it is the largest lake in Africa. It borders Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania. It's a huge, huge lake, you guys. It has a lot of islands in it as well that belong to Uganda. These are the Sese Islands. There's about 84 islands, I want to say. And along the coastline here we have cities like Entebbe and Jinja, which really rely on the lake for actually tourism. Lots of lake activities and stuff, same on the islands here. You can see that this region is known as Buganda, which we will talk about a lot in its history. You can assume by the name here. But it's the name of the old kingdom that reigned in this area, and their capital and the capital of modern-day Uganda is Kampala, which is not too far from the lake at all. There are lots of other lakes in Uganda, though. Uganda is part of the African Great Lakes region that just slices right down through this area here. You can see Lake Albert right here and Lake Edward, and right in the middle you can see this big lake here. That's Lake Kyoga. And what's interesting about this area is that it is the source of the Nile River, which is right here. This area is known as the Victoria Nile. It flows up into Lake Kyoga and then flows out into Lake Albert, where it becomes the Albert Nile. You can see right there flowing up. Of course, the Nile River has like a million names, right? This area is also known as the White Nile. And as it goes up into South Sudan, it gets other names. But it's throughout the rest of Africa here. So that's really interesting. There was a big quest led by the British to find the source of the Nile, and they came here and apparently found it by accident. But anyway, there are lots of other little rivers throughout the country, but that's definitely the most important, right? It is the longest river in the world. There are also lots of mountains in Uganda, the highest being right here on the border with the DRC. The mountain is Mount Stanley, but Mount Stanley has multiple peaks, and the highest peak is Margarita Peak, which, if you're wondering why there's so many Western names, I mean, obviously, right? It's colonization. This area is part of the Ruwenzori mountain chains. There's also the Virunga Mountains down here. And these areas are very thickly forested. This park down here is called the Bwindi Impenetrable National Park. And it's called that because it is incredibly thick forest. You need a machete to get through. There's no trails or anything. There's lots of other little national parks. I want to talk about Murchison Falls. The Murchison Falls National Park is obviously home to Murchison Falls. It's a part where the Nile shrinks down into these rapids, and it creates this really big ol' awesome waterfall. There'll definitely be pictures in this book. After we do history, we'll flip this book and look at all the pictures. But Murchison Falls National Park is one of those African parks that has lions, elephants, all the all the African animals you can imagine, right? All of the classics, hippopotamus, zebras, I believe. Oh, but what's most important, in my opinion, for the animals in Uganda is down here in the Bwindi Forest and up here in the, I want to say in the Ruwenzori Mountains Park too, yeah, is one of the last homes of mountain gorillas. The only place you can really find them in the wild is in this area, and some up here as well. There's like different little clans of gorillas. And that's really important. This area is very heavily protected so that the gorillas can have a safe place to live, you know. Let's see, what else? There's so many things to talk about. Let's talk about Mount Elgon, which is over here on the border with Kenya. It's an extinct volcano. It's the oldest extinct volcano. It's pretty big, but if you look at pictures of it, you can tell that it blew its top at some point. And a really interesting mountain. Apparently it's one of those like fun mountains to climb. Not so much over here because they're so high they're covered in snow and glaciers, so you can climb them, but just be prepared for that. And while this area is mostly forests and wet rivers and lakes and things, you head up here and it gets a lot more dry, savanna-y kind of African environment. It's a very beautiful place and has a really interesting history. So let me check my notes, make sure I got everything I wanted to say. I don't want to forget anything. I think I got everything. Okay, let's go over history. So, for history, we don't know a lot until about the 1800s. What we do know is that there were quite a few different ethnic groups living in this area, mainly in the north up here. They would have been Nilotic people and Sudanic people. And during the Bantu migration, the Bantu migrated into the area and over time merged with these tribes to create new Bantu-speaking ethnic groups. So there was really no outside contact of this area. I mean, it is quite deep inside Africa, right? There's really no reason for people to just stumble upon this area. It's, again, thickly forested, right? The 1830s was when there was the first contact with the outside, and they were Arab traders, and they came across multiple different kingdoms. We already talked about Buganda. They were pretty big. There was also the Bunyoro kingdom. That's going to be important in a minute. But there are lots of other ones in the north, mainly the Toro kingdom. There's also the Acholi tribe, the Kakwa tribe, among many others. Like, we don't have time to get into them all, but I mean, those are the like most important and basic Ugandan history, but there's many more. So eventually, Egypt is right up there, right? We talked about the Nile. Egypt was looking to expand further south. Egypt was under the control of the British at that time, so they sent some British explorers to explore, and that's when they found the source of the Nile and explored this area, started making contact with the people here, and the British explorers made contact with the Bunyoro tribe, who attacked them and chased them out of their area. So they went back to England and said, they wrote a book about how like the Bunyoro were like the worst, like they were so mean and they were horrible people. So when they came back, they managed to contact the Buganda kingdom, who they were like, yeah, the Bunyoro weren't very friendly, and Buganda was like, oh yeah, like we know. So we're friends now. So the British and the Buganda aligned. Just a note, the king of the Buganda is known as the Kabaka. And once British contact was made, the Kabaka at the time really got along with the British. And when missionaries arrived in about the 1870s, the Kabaka at the time also really liked them. He welcomed Catholics and Protestants, even some like Muslims came into the area, and he really welcomed that. And when he died, his son took over, and he was very, very anti-Christian, to the point where like massacres and things like that and chasing all the missionaries out. He was very much against it. So the British didn't like that. They deposed him and put his infant son in power. So the British basically controlled Buganda at that point, right? There's also lots of religious tension that started sparking up between the different religions. So Britain was like, look, this is a mess. We want this asset, right? This is the source of the Nile. There's lots of good resources here. We've got all the lakes and things. We really want this territory, so we really want it to be stable. So they made it a protectorate in 1894 to protect their assets. So the British did recognize that this area was pretty much being self-governed as it was, so they didn't make it a full-on colony. They made it a protectorate so that the people who were in charge already could continue being in charge as long as they swore loyalty to the British. And it was mostly just Buganda at this time. After 1900 up until the 1930s, they expanded further north into this area and signed treaties with all the other kingdoms up here to merge them together, which the Buganda people weren't really happy about because the tribes up here were pretty much nothing like the Buganda. They were a totally different culture, you know. They were the British, you know, they were being like British educated, they had British industry, all of that, was these guys up here were just living their tribal lives. So there is already that ethnic tension, which will be very important in a minute. When independence was granted to Uganda on October 9th, 1962, the Kabaka at the time was placed as the president, and he made a man named Milton Obote as his prime minister, as Obote was from the north. So the logic there was, oh, we have a southern president and a northern prime minister, unity, right? But that didn't really work out. You know, people weren't too pleased about the southern preference here, especially since like this was more of the elite area, and the area up here was actually where at first the British and then later the nation of Uganda recruited a lot of its military. So it was more military lifestyle up here, more like political lifestyle down here, let's say. So it didn't quite mesh very well. Milton Obote threw the Kabaka out of power in 1966 to become the sole leader of Uganda, promising all of these wonderful, like, unity, bringing the country together, but it still didn't happen, still didn't work. And in 1971, he was overthrown by one of his generals named Idi Amin. And at the time, Obote was more socialist, Idi Amin was not, so the West, like the US and all that, were like, oh, cool, things, like, we don't mind. But Idi Amin was one of the worst dictators to have lived. He was a horrific, really terrible person in all the ways that dictators are horrible, horrific people. Let's just put it that way. There's actually a really good movie called The Last King of Scotland about Idi Amin. It's really interesting. You can learn more about his life in there, but he pretty much killed hundreds of thousands of people, deported a lot of the Indian people back to India, losing all of that industry, basically tanked the economy. And once it all started to go south, he decided to declare war on Tanzania to try to conquer land. And Tanzania fought back in a big way, to the point in 1979 they invaded Uganda and overthrew Idi Amin. There was a bit of to do after that. There was an election. Milton Obote was re-elected, and he continued to do the not great job of trying to unify the country that he was doing before, so people were very upset. A lot of forces, especially in the north, were forming militant groups, and a civil war broke out. It eventually led to one of the leaders of those rebel groups becoming the next president. His name was Yoweri Museveni. He became president in 1986. He is still president to this day, which is a bit worrying, you know. He technically has elections, which he manages to find reasons to jail all of his opponents when they run against him so that he always wins. He's essentially declared himself president for life. And that's pretty much where Uganda is today. There was an election just a few months ago, and well, I'm filming this May 2022, so it was in like mid-2021, so a year ago. His main opponent was actually a former pop star from Uganda named Bobby Wine. He became a politician, was doing pretty well for himself, decided to run for president, and he was of course jailed, and people were very convinced to not vote for him. He got a lot of the vote, but not enough to make him president. So Museveni is still president. A couple of other issues that have happened in recent Ugandan history was during the Congo War, the Second Congo War that broke out in the DRC, that pretty much involved every country in the surrounding area. So Uganda got involved in that, in the fighting, and also in the refugees coming over the border. There's also the Lord's Resistance Army, which was a Christian militant group led by Joseph Kony. Became a notorious meme basically in 2012. If you were there, you remember. But he's been pretty much squashed for the time being. And lastly, one of the main issues going on in Uganda is their LGBT rights, or the lack thereof. Being gay is severely criminalized in Uganda, and it's considered to be the worst possible taboo you could be, is to identify as LGBT. And yeah, it's criminal. It's illegal to be LGBT in Uganda, to the point where you are villainized if you identify as LGBT. It's a pretty rough situation happening in this corner of the world. It's one of the many countries throughout the world where being LGBT is a death sentence. So essentially that's where Uganda is today. Why don't we go through the book and look at some neat pictures of Uganda? Let me put this down and we will flip through the book. Let's see the pictures inside. Beautiful, beautiful countryside here. And there's some, let's see, young people here celebrating something. These are cobs, pretty much like little antelope guys out here in the beautiful savannah. Here's Margarita Peak. You can see the snow up there. And here's Mount Elgon, which, yeah, it's pretty wild terrain. We've got the source of the Nile River right here, coming out of Lake Victoria. A Nile crocodile, a big jumper, and a very sweet mountain gorilla. And the national bird, the crested crane. It's so beloved, it's on their flag. And here is Kampala, the capital city, and by far the largest city in Uganda. Let's see, they're celebrating the 24th anniversary of Yoweri Museveni's rise to power in 2010. There's a little map of Uganda here. What else do we have? The Kabaka of Uganda reviewing his troops. So they're doing a dance. There's Milton Obote. And this is a statue of Mutesa II, the Kabaka who was the president for that time in history. There's Idi Amin. And here he is giving a speech. And there's Yoweri Museveni. It is more like rebel times, it looks like. And there's Joseph Kony. And there's Bobby Wine giving a speech on top of a car. Everyone's very excited to see him. It's Robert Kyagulanyi. That's his real name, not a stage name. He doesn't go by Bobby Wine. It's just a great stage name, let's be honest here. There's Museveni giving a speech. The State House in Entebbe. Let's see. Here's Museveni up here addressing Parliament. And let's see, protests against violence against women, another big issue in Uganda. Oh boy, he's got some coffee bean. Wow, wow, a lot of beans. Here's their currency. They use the Uganda shilling. I can turn the page. There we go. Let's see. They are mining for gold up here in the mountains. Very laborious work. Old-fashioned gold mining is rough. And here's some fishermen in Lake Victoria. And let's see. Planting some rice, it looks like, in the muddy field. Oh, child labor, that's sad. Some children here. Looks like he's made a little cart for himself. Also an issue in Uganda. And I've got everybody there on the bike. Let's see. Road going from Kampala to Entebbe. Oh, isn't that beautiful? This is the Bwindi Penetrable Forest National Park. Stunning. Untouched, perfect rainforest. Let's see, we've got a flood happening here, one of the many issues of climate change. And a white rhino, very endangered animal. Some lilies there in the water. Let's see, they're gathering some water there. And it wasn't this sad. It's this really beautiful bird around all the trash. That's sad. And let's see. Oh, the water hyacinths clogging up the lake. Another environmental issue. That's a great face. Got some happy people here. Let's see. This is a Baganda person, it says. A very up-close picture of bark cloth, traditional clothing. And here's some Ugandans from the Acholi tribe. And here's Batwa person. Lots of different peoples. A very busy day in Kampala. Over here. Some very traditional looking rural homes there. Little roundhouses. And we've got some mothers over here, soon to be mothers. And over here we've got some drums happening, it says. A big party happening. They've all got their feathers on and costume. Looks fun. And here is a pride parade. Again, it's a big issue in Uganda. Health clinic over here. You know, HIV/AIDS is also an issue in Uganda. And here are some HIV positive. Well, this man I think is HIV positive. Or no, maybe they all are. I'm not sure. I can't really tell on the thing here, but they're receiving treatment. And we're working hard in school. Check it out. And let's see. This is Makerere University in Kampala. A very, probably the biggest university in Uganda. Oh, it's worship time. And let's see, this is the Bagisu tribe, it says, having a celebration. Here we have a little church. Very tiny pictures in this book, isn't it? Very tiny. Let's see. This is Christopher Senyonjo, who supports the LGBT population. And there's a mosque. Tiny little picture of a mosque. Well, that's a cool picture. Ooh, I really like that. It's almost like a painting. It's beautiful. Let's see. Some newspapers here. It is Museveni again until 2021. Reelected with 60%, and then he was reelected in 2021. We're weaving a basket here. That's awesome. We've got a magazine about, it has lots of different writing in it, from different authors. Here's Mary Karo Okut speaking in London. There's Bobby Wine performing, it looks like. And here's an artist, Nua Wamala Nyanzi. That's his art. That's very beautiful. Let's see what else we have. Oh, playing some football there. It's another great photo. What else do we have? He's playing hoops. They're in a little, very impoverished looking village. And they're playing some pool in the club. And the soccer team at the World Cup in 2016. Oh, cool. Big parade. Marching band. Let's see. Some Muslims here celebrating Maulid Nabi. Bishop Janani Luwum, who spoke out against Idi Amin. Food. Lots of food here. The market. We've got some matoke. Looks pretty good. Let's see, what is it? Stalks, plant fibers. Okay, so it's just like a vegetable mush, which, I mean, can't go wrong with vegetable mush, right? Old-fashioned mortar and pestle, grinding things together. And some children hanging out together. Having a little snack, it looks like. What's okay? Okay, so let's see. Plantains in lemon juice. We've got onions, peppers, garlic, chili peppers, coriander, beef, tomatoes. Just a big mush, which I'm not opposed to. Luwambo. Looks like a little beef stew here. And then we've got this big map where you can see based on the elevation just how high and hilly it is compared to this area over here, and then especially down here in the mountains. And this would be where Uganda is located in the world. Right, so that's going to be it for tonight. You look at the map again. Thank you so much for watching. I have a lot of videos planned for you about Uganda, including one about the gorillas down here in the forest. So be sure to subscribe so you won't miss out. Thank you so much again. I hope that you found this video relaxing and educational, and I hope that you have a very good night.